and thank you very much for inviting me to make this speech. Maybe I could make a few preliminary remarks before I can get into my presentation. First and foremost, I feel very at home among comrades. I feel very warm, even though I'm in the belly of the beast. But I feel very comradely amongst you. And some of you, I have gotten an opportunity to interact with you people at a very personal level. And maybe I should not go far without saying that at least during my visit to China, I got an opportunity to meet Comrade George. And that is how the string has come to this historic place. After that, I meet Comrade Keith from the Friends of Socialist China. And in Cuba, I also met Jonathan White. And then I met Jyoti Bra. Then now I come here to share with you my thinking. And also to tell you that probably not really that I know much, but learning is a dialectical process. So we are going to relate and learn from each other's, at least social experiences, because all knowledge comes from social practice and experience. So probably our experiences in Kenya and also in Africa are much different from your experiences. So if we can build on those experiences, then we can move this great agenda, the anti-imperialist agenda. So comrades and friends, this particular topic, it's at the center of the debate, not just among the left, but also in the reactionary spaces. So we have to clarify, the position of China as revolutionaries and as progressives. So I am very grateful that I'm here to at least share with you a few of my thinking on China and the rise of Global South. And when I was preparing for this presentation, people ask, why is it that the Global South has remained backward? Is it because their leaders are lazy? Is it because their climate is not right? Is it because they are bewitched? There are so many questions that are being asked why really Africa has remained a backward country. And of course, China is rising. So if we can answer those questions in a very historical way, then we can try to at least jointly and collectively figure out what the future of the global communist movement is. So I will go to my presentation and probably answer some of your questions and also ask you some of the questions as we continue with this forum this evening. So esteemed comrades, at least before you today, I am representing the Communist Party of Kenya. And I must also admit that the Communist Party of Kenya has its own challenges, just like the communist movement in Britain. Probably you have better ways to resolve our problems. We also have some other ways to resolve our problems. Maybe today we'll share experiences and learn from one another. There is also a concept that sometimes is difficult to understand, especially for people that do not come from Africa, especially the concept of Pan-Africanism. So probably I will also use this opportunity to explain our thinking about Pan-Africanism. So another organization that I represent that goes with the initial PASA, it's Pan-African Socialist Alliance. So those are the two organizations that I represent today. But it's also important that I tell you, from the bottom of my heart about the struggles of the Communist Party of Kenya, because if I don't tell you, then where could I be looking for answer? Because this is a comradely talk. Remember, some of the questions that the communists continue to grapple with is whether to take part in bourgeois elections or not. And even if you agree to take part in bourgeois elections, the next question is that should you form coalitions with bourgeois political parties? That was the major question in 2022 that brought several debates in the Communist Party of Kenya that led to a split between the majority and the minority. It is also it should be clear that I am here to represent the majority faction of the Communist Party of Kenya and not the minority factions that currently serve under the leadership of the Comprado class under President Samoei Ruto in Kenya. In fact, we are not just saying that this split, you could look at it. There is always positive and negative side. It's never all positive or negative. Because maybe we say that many comrades globally ask us, Booker, why don't you unite? But then my answer to them, what use will be a united Communist Party of Kenya to the working class if it is only based on opportunism and revisionism and cutting deals with the ruling class? So in that aspect, I think the split, was a good thing. Because just like, your body is only alive because, the cells continue to multiply and the bad ones die and the good ones actually thrive. So in that sense, we see the split as a strength and not as something that we should cry about. But on the negative side also, we must admit that a united Communist Party of Kenya that represent the working class of Kenya, it's more stronger than, two factions of the Communist Party. But we think that this split will bring another enriched unity because you can divide and then come up with another new unity that is, more revolutionary. And I could give you an example because this has happened in our party. In 2013, we had the Youth League of the party. At that time, the Young Communist League. But comrades, when, they traveled, they got influenced by certain movements like the Green Movement, and they came to the party and decided, with a different thinking in the party. So they separated and formed the Revolutionary Socialist League. But 7 years, has gone, but they are back again with us to now discuss even a more enriched unity. So what I wanted to underscore that sometimes divisions are inevitable, but they are not bad in themselves. Only how revolutionary treat those divisions. That is my first preliminary comment that I wanted to make, comrades. The second part, of course, is the Pan-African Socialist Alliance. When you talk about, and this we have seen it differently, even when we interact with some of the comrades from the global north, especially the question of class and race. Which one is the primacy? Sometimes, especially when you are from a country where racism is institutionalized, you think that now the white, red and black is the primary contradiction. So such thinking also exists within the Pan-Africanist movement. But for us as revolutionaries, I think our duty is to try to clarify. And even when we clarify, we don't say that our position is right, because today's position can be enriched, further. But Pan-African Socialist Alliance is actually a revolutionary movement. Just because that at the continental level, we still lack the vanguard of the proletariat. This is still the case in the global level. We cannot say that we have a vanguard of the global proletariat at the moment, but there are, baby steps, different steps that are heading towards that objective reality. Just to clarify, for us, we think that even though we have a shared history within the African continent, but a united, liberated, free Africa, we don't envision it like the unity of Europe that is built, on plunder of other countries. We actually envision a united, free, liberated Africa as an objective. But the software that runs that unity is indeed scientific socialism. That is our position. Comrades, I also got the opportunity. Of course, I traveled today. I left Nairobi and I had a stopover in Addis Ababa and about some 22 hours, and I arrived in Paris. And maybe from Paris to London, I came. But also last year, I also traveled to China. And I got an opportunity to travel to China at least 2 times. Probably it's also good that I tell you my experiences. At least I will not say that I am, an expert on China issues. But I think I can tell you my observation. But the debate about what China is or what it should be, it's an ongoing debate that we cannot monopolize. We can continue to debate about that. But when I was traveling here, maybe Keith was very worried that maybe my visa processes will not allow me to come to this process. But the visa process to come to London is highly commercialized, really. In fact, I had a short time to process my visa to come here. So the computer, I could not speak to anyone, so I had to communicate to the computer, And then they asked me, Booker, do you want to apply for an express visa? Then I said, yes. Then they tell you, okay, pay £500. And then they tell you, do you want to book an appointment? Do you want to choose the time of your appointment? Then they tell you, pay such amount. And then they tell you, I had to apply for 2 visas, the Schengen visa to go to Paris, and then apply for the UK visa. So they asked me, do you want to keep your passport? Then they say, pay this to keep your passport. So it's a very highly, commercialized process. But it is different when I was applying for my visa to China. If you missed, China in Nairobi when you apply for a visa, you just go and do a normal application. And sometimes if you forget a document, they will photocopy it for you there and give you. But for this TS contact guys, they will tell you, go back and reschedule your appointment. So that is the kind of simple experiences that probably all of us see when you interact with people or institutions or systems. But let me go further and say that I think there are certain also concepts that that we need to probably interrogate in detail, because the debate in the public square has been dominated by mainly the Western logic. But what about the Chinese or the African logic? It's important for us to try and bring certain things into perspective. But I will say that in my 2 visits to China, first of all, I will say that in my own analysis, whatever you want to call the Chinese system is way more superior than the Western system, than the United States system. But its character we may debate about. But in terms of even its socio-economic and political system, and the reasons why I say that they are, when you are feeding on mainly corporate propaganda, even the concept of racism. We are told that the Chinese racism and Western racism, but I think there is a difference in my thinking, because Chinese racism, actually the Chinese authority do not tolerate it. They discourage and even punish it. While in the United States, it is institutionalized. It forms a privileged class. Just because you are white, you're privileged in the United States. But, from Africa, we have developed a thick skin. If you don't have powers and you're a racist, we don't care, but if you have powers and it can actually influence, to make certain decisions that actually will compromise our dignity, then we have to resist it. But, I was also very happy that I could speak, especially young Chinese people could speak some proficient English and debate about, certain issues within Beijing Street. While I was, conditioned that China was particularly a closed society and basically only carrying out a genocide against the Muslim community. While even in the hotel I saw an halal place where the Muslim people could actually, enjoy their delicacies. So what I'm trying to put across, that without interrogating and critically thinking, especially the dominating ideas of the United States propaganda and the so-called civilized West, it can make you, hate certain people that you're not meant to even hate before even meeting them. Remember, we are told that the Chinese goods and services are fake before even using them. So you should just sit in Kenya and wait for fake products to come. So such is how the propaganda works. But allow me to revisit, I made a commentary in 2017 when I was asked to give a few comments on what is the difference between Africa-China relationship and, of course, the Western governments. When I say the Western, I mean the ruling class, the ruling elite. What is the difference in that kind of relationship? And this is what I had to say in 2017. The partnership, particularly the partnership between China and Kenya, as well as Africa at large, has not spurred remarkable infrastructural development, but has not only spurred remarkable infrastructural development, but has also fostered a genuine cultural exchange between Chinese and African communities. It has provided Africans with first-hand insights into Chinese culture, dispelling the half-truths and misinformation perpetuated against China and its people, often propagated globally by Western media outlets like CNN, BBC, and Fox News. Moreover, this relationship has highlighted an alternative approach to engaging the development partners and international capital. Unlike the United States and Western nations, which have historically imposed detrimental policies on African nations through institutions like IMF and World Bank, such as the infamous structural adjustment plans known as SARBs, China has adopted a policy of non-interference in the internal affairs of sovereign countries. This shift has spared African nations from the suffering and the hardship inflicted by such destructive policies. That was in 2017. But also another notable aspect in the projects that is being done by our Chinese partners. Another notable aspect is the efficiency with which the projects are executed. Previously, bureaucratic red tape and exorbitant cost often prolonged project timelines, sometimes spanning several years before ground activities commence. However, with the influx of Chinese investment, Africa has witnessed a swift turnaround. Projects are now executed promptly, delivering high-quality results. This stands in stark contrast to the portrayal by Western media, which often dismisses products and projects from China and Russia as inferior before their arrival. These words remain true today, even though the attitude of the ruling class in the global north towards the Chinese socialist experiment remains unchanged more than 5 years later. So the second part of my presentation mainly is to try and look at the root cause of African problems and how we can design solutions. And why do we say that what has made China to rise, because maybe some of you will accept and some of you will not accept, but the truth is China is the de facto leader of the global South at the moment. And it's playing an important role in challenging, the hegemony of the dominance class in the United States, who actually, unfortunately, the politicians in Europe cannot make their decisions. They are actually, I think, just another colonial entity because they have to rely on, the United States, Joe Biden's, to dictate for them what to do in Europe, just like you can see in the case of the proxy war in Ukraine. So the challenges facing the global South are actually vast, encompassing socio-economic and political issues. But the truth of the matter that these socio-political problems that are facing Africa are systemic. They are not based on just, what they want to call bad decision by Black people. They are actually colonial and neo-colonial, systems that actually subjugate the African economies to the economies of the metropole. This is something that has been problematic, especially for, the bourgeois intellectuals or what we call the pink economists that try to only analyze the failures of the African socioeconomic system only from the African, trajectory, but not forgetting the unequal relationship that takes place between the African economies and the countries of the metropole. In factually, in actual sense, those relationships are not just exploitative, but some of these African leaders or leaders of the global South are only puppets of Western governments. While geopolitical unrest and interventions, this concept of a liberal democracy that is mainly manufacturing war in the global South. If you tell me you want to export a democracy, and comrades, then we have to critically think, what is this democracy that they want to export to us? And they tell us, China is a dictatorship. But don't you think the United States is a dictatorship of capital? Any billionaire, foolish bigot can actually be a United States politician. It's no. So it's important for us to actually interrogate when we talk about liberal democracy, because even today in Kenya, we continue to reflect that several people martyred in the streets of Nairobi. And for a moment, there was a fight between the British, the colonial British, and the United States in our own land. This clash was because of economic interest. And even though the British government was supporting the one-party dictatorship at that time, which was Dictator Moi, but the United States challenging the dominance of the British, the classical British in our country, in the name of democracy, it was, they say that we want a multi-party democracy in Kenya, but without communism. So what democracy is that? So the fight was mainly of the United States capital to actually subjugate the Kenyan economy, but really not to export this, what is called, so-called liberal democracy. Actually, in Kenya today, if you don't have money and you don't have a chance to participate in the bourgeois democratic processes, because it's actually really money laundering process. During an election time, you try and, just continue to give money to the poor people. and then you try to get back your money like in a casino, through, corruption and cutting deals. Such cannot be a perfect system that we can be told that United States is concerned about Kenya today. But at least from, the attitude of the Chinese logic towards democracy is that we have to, if we want to improve the quality of our democracy, then people have to make decisions, not just on who has the money, but also based on meritocracy. One time I was, I'm a trained engineer, so I was working with a Chinese carpenter, and sometimes it's a joke in our country. So the normal Kenyan people ask these Chinese, but you cannot vote in your country. Then I was very intrigued by his reply, because he said that, why should I vote? I'm a carpenter, but my daughter and my son is in the political school, will make good decisions for my country. But if you have any questions about carpentry, please feel free to ask that question, which I felt was very fascinating, in the sense that, we could actually get somebody in the level of the carpenter to give such a sound response to people who are attacking him that he does not have a right to vote, while this right to vote is basically rigged from the start. I'm just being told I have 5 minutes to go, and I'm not just halfway on my speech. Maybe I'll ask the coordinators to add me a bit, maybe 7 more minutes, so that I wrap up my presentation. Yeah. So let me go to imperialism, because this is also an important topic. Maybe some of you would like to say that China is an imperialist country, Russia is an imperialist country. Some of you, maybe some people still say everybody is an imperialist country. Every capitalist is an imperialist country. But I think that we can go to the scientific definition of imperialism. But let us see the possibility that China actually gives to the global anti-imperialist movement at this moment. For us, we think that China has a very important position. Even for those who are thinking that, wrongfully thinking that China is an imperialist country, then the next question they should ask themselves, which is the primary enemy at the moment? Because we cannot continue saying this is bad, this is bad. Because in the national agenda in Kenya, we isolate the primary enemy and mobilizes all forces to defeat the primary enemy. At least in that way, we can get to the next level of the struggle. But if we keep on accusing every person, then we think that we cannot move forward. So for us, in our thinking, is that the primary enemy in the world today is United States imperialism, in whose ruins a new society will be birthed, in whose ruins a new society will blossom. So the defeat of the United States dominance class and the empire will actually accelerate the people's camps, the communist camp, to advance. So we even admire, maybe we could say, why do we admire the Chinese socialist, experiment? Because China has been accused of all sorts of things, but why do we continue to admire China and Chinese socialist experiment? Remember, after independence, all the colonized countries, they only chose 2 options. There are colonized countries that after independence, they chose the neoliberal, position of the United States and the so-called civilized West. But then there is the other camp that chose to build their internal productive forces and develop their own path away from the neoliberal. That is what accounts for the success in the Chinese socialist experiment and no other. Remember, if you're talking about population, look at India. If you're talking about geography, so it is about this, what path did that country take after it gained independence? In our opinion, we think those countries that took the socialist path and rejected the neoliberal, path of the United States and the so-called civilized West are actually on the right trajectory. And today, we were discussing, in the plane when I was coming here on how is it possible that who will lead the anti-imperialist camp, especially in the current circumstances. Remember, in the United Nations Security Council, DPRK has been a punching bag there. And sometimes, unfortunately, sometimes China and Russia support sanctions, of DPRK. But now with the current circumstances, that now Russia has been slapped by the same unilateral sanctions and coercive measures, then we see that at least at the United Nations, the DPRK has been able to attract the support of Russia and China. And if the war breaks out, who will fight to the inevitable conclusion, at least to the revolutionary conclusion? Maybe we may have different positions on that, but in our analysis, we think that when, some of the problems that we think, maybe you who live in Europe probably have a better idea, but as some of the problems we think that face the anti-war movement, mainly in Europe, is pacifism, because probably some of them has not realized that war is the highest level of contradiction in the society. And after the war, nothing actually remains the same. So we do not fear war. In fact, if we can turn civil or world war into a revolutionary war, then we should unite to actually advance that war. But we must not fall short, for example, in Kenya, to tribal, ethnic, warlords that is currently taking place, for example, in Sudan. For example, at least we are glad that French imperialism is being defeated every day in the Sahel region. We had some of the United States politicians, after the events in the West Africa, they started saying that, we do not want coups. It was laughable that they want to support only democratic government. But these people who tells us that they want to support democratic government, are they not the people who only support coups when those coups are on their interest? So the Communist Party of Kenya actually issued a statement in solidarity with those coups. In fact, we say that coups are not just coups. They are coups that are anti-imperialist, like what we are seeing in Burkina Faso, in Niger, in Mali. But also there are coups that, like the one we saw in Libya. So we must be able to critically think and to advance, because for us in the people's camp, our duty is to be able to move this struggle from one level to the other. And that basically means forming tactical and strategic alliances to advance this struggle. Even though we must never fall for either right-wing opportunism or left-wing opportunism, because left-wing opportunism, then we tend to be Puritans, that, we are the vanguard of the working class. We cannot form alliances with the others. We may fall in the era of what the Trotskyists, fell when they opposed, alliances, to defeat the fascism in Europe, or even the right wing, where some people want to even form tactical alliances with our primary enemy. For example, in the neocolonial global South, some people want to form tactical alliances with the comprado class. That is foolishness, because how will you form a tactical alliance with the primary enemy that you seek to defeat? How will you form, for example, tactical alliances with the US imperialism? You will be slaughtered. So in that case, I will want to probably wrap up my presentation by trying to clarify maybe 2 or 3 concepts, then I will finalize. The first concept, which I already talked about, and I will read it in excerpt so that we move forward. In the Western liberal democracy, concepts such as freedom, human rights, it's only talk, but the conditions it's like somebody say you are free to own land in any part of United Kingdom, but without money, how will you own land? You are actually, living in abstract. And even issues to do with human rights. When you are walking in dirty streets, for example, you're not living in a dignified house. You don't have a job, but you're allowed to run your mouth dry about, human rights. How is it possible that such circumstances, especially now that the United States is on the decline? Last time I visited Athens, for example, I could see several homeless people. And even now when I was coming here, I see several homeless people. So how is it possible to just say that you can talk about issues to do with freedom, you talk about human rights? So those concepts, I think, China has actually been able to advance them, and we can continue to debate about them. So, comrades, I have 0 minutes left. Maybe in future we could talk about this center periphery dependency. It's also another concept that I would have loved to speak about. And even you probably must have had this absurd accusation of the debt trap strategy towards the African countries. I would have loved to say that, because most of the debts in the African continent at the moment are with the Paris Club, are with the IMF, are with the World Bank, So such concepts, we could continue to actually crystallize our mind around them after this meeting, and talk about even the certain similarities between African objective reality and the Chinese set goals. I have made certain comparisons that I will share my speech with you in regard to the African Union, for example, Agenda 2063, the China-African Vision 2035. I have also tried to clarify about the thinking about the global community of shared future, which, if you get time, please, I will share with you my speech to read through it. After those many remarks, comrade, I would just say, long live socialism, long live the friends of Socialist China, long live the Communist Party of Kenya, and I wish you, a good time and debates today. I hope I will.